Hello, everyone. I'm Amir Kermani. I am the Director of Industry Solutions at Databricks, and I am joined with my colleague Baisal from John Snow Labs. And today we will be talking about implementing a RAG LLM clinical chatbot with John Snow Labs in Databricks. But before that, I will start with just looking at the space of generative AI, specifically through the enterprise lens, and why Databricks is being chosen by many organizations for their Gen AI initiatives. I think we all agree that generative AI is changing everything, changing the landscape. And that also includes the future of work and how work has been done, will be done. As a matter of fact, there was in a survey conducted by MIT Technology Review, 71% of the executives, the CEOs that responded, said that they want to build their own generative AI models, or they have initiatives, or they have started doing that. And this really boils down to the fact that the realization that companies realizing that their moat is their proprietary data that they have. And obviously, training Gen AI models actually on their proprietary data translates to their own IP, and that gives them a competitive edge, which is very important for any organization. And of the workloads and use cases that most organizations are now converging around initially to tackle is improving workforce productivity, internal productivity of the workforce. And through the lens of Gen AI or LLMs, when you're looking at it, basically any task that requires a human comprehension of natural language and involves some basic reasoning, such as summarization, extracting some document, some entities from the text, that is something now that is within the scope of automation using Gen AI and LLMs. And we are seeing that basically the all winners in all industries across the board, across the verticals, will be using Gen AI to succeed. And specifically within healthcare and life sciences, we are already seeing a lot of use cases started being considered and being used within Databricks. These include, for example, biomedical information retrieval and document synthesis. So that can be anything that you can imagine, and that application can go across the sectors within healthcare and life sciences. In life sciences, for example, you can have improvement and productivity increase within the R&D teams by, you can imagine, by implementation of a RAG system that Vaisal will be walking you through today. You can have a chatbot specifically on a corpus of your internal and combined with external research, and just ask questions, and it can also do basic reasoning based on the data that you have. On a clinical support, on a clinical decision support, or improving patient engagement, basically the idea of having, for example, this customer chatbots that can interact with patients or members if you are a payer. That's another application. And also, the more advanced applications that we are seeing is on the drug discovery, for example, training models that are non-human language models, for example, protein models or DNA models, that you can design, for example, a new protein sequence based on the function. So the sky is the limit in terms of the applications of Gen AI. But the reality is that moving from experimentation and prototyping to production is a big challenge. And why is that? So look at an example. We are seeing a lot. A team is building a customer chatbot, doing a Q&A, and they implement that very quickly using ChatGPT, OpenAI, LangChain, or AutoGPT. And that's like 75% accuracy. Okay, great. But what's the path to production, to put this in production? And that is actually non-trivial. And why is that? The number one thing is, specifically when you're looking at industries, within industries that are regulated, for good reasons, we are concerned about the risk. And risk can show itself in variety of models. For example, um, if I'm training my own model, let's say, did I use proprietary data? What data went into this model? Are we regulatory compliant in that perspective? On the other side of the story, if I'm using a SaaS model, what kind of information am I exposing to the endpoint API? Am I exposing my proprietary information again to an API that it is being, the data is being sent outside of the organization? Again, going back to the organization, if I am train my own model, or I have a RAG system that it is faced in production, how I thought about prompt injection attacks. What is the risk of exposing proprietary patient information in a public-facing, API? So the other risk is that when you're going to production, there are risks of hallucination, toxicity. How am I going to monitor that? How am I going to control for that and see the feedback, for example? And also, when you're looking at any of these Gen AI applications, these are basically extensions of the old, ML AI, classic traditional ML applications. In the fact that you need a big part of that story is bringing the data to the model. And that is what exactly Vaisal is talking about. For example, where you're implementing a RAG model, there's a lot of data movement here. So it's very important is that what's your solution? What's the integration of this LLM ops within your data stack? How is that looking? And the other one is that the cost. Always the problem is the cost is important. When you're looking, as an example, when I'm looking through the lens of, let's say, using a SaaS model. Well, going back to the chatbot model that I mentioned, in prototyping, you're sending a couple of tokens, thousands of tokens, etc. You may not see the bill as much. But when you're looking at putting in production, let's say, again, going to RAG model, you're going to augment your prompt with a large corpus of data that you're sending to the API endpoint. And these APIs are actually, the way that they charge you is per, let's say, per token that you're processing. And that can actually add up. So what's my policy in terms of monitoring this cost? How am I monitoring this cost? How am I, making sure that it doesn't go above a point? Or also, what are the alternative solutions? Well, if I'm going to train my own model, or fine-tune my own model, that can actually be expensive. So, and this is why we are seeing this convergence around Databricks data intelligence platform that I will briefly talk about on using Gen AI using it for Gen AI. Number one thing is that, well, the solution for lack of control is that, okay, you can own your own model the same way that you own your data, and that improves your privacy. And by the way, you want to have it all governed within the same model, so you need the governance and privacy, governance and lineage on that. The other one is that, in terms of putting in production, the number one value add, I think, from Databricks data intelligence platform is that this is building your Gen AI solution on top of your data solution. So you bring everything is now within integrated stack, and that really helps the streamlining this production, putting application into production, because you have the data backend. It is all monitored. You have this kind of iterative process that exposing it to LLMs that you monitor and you own and repeat. And finally, when you're looking at the cost, and this is, a lot of it goes back to, our acquisition of Mosaic ML, is that's technology that specifically is built for making sure that you have a cost-effective way of training and fine-tuning your own models. And also we have solutions in place that if you're using a SaaS system, also you're able to monitor the SaaS models that you have. So going back, this is why many organizations are looking at using Databricks platform for their enterprise solutions is that number one thing is that you have complete control, you have complete ownership and control over both the models and the data that you have. The other one is that you have production quality, you have faster, more reliable deployment across multiple use cases. And finally, you are lowering your cost. And let's just do a quick deep dive into each of these points. The first advantage, as I mentioned, is a complete control. So, as I mentioned, you have complete ownership over your data, but now also you have complete ownership over your models. And this is basically, for example, let's say in the context of building a RAG, and that's the topic of today, is that, well, you have your models, your data actually, you have it stored in Lakehouse, and there's no limit on the data that you can store here. It's kind of elastic. So you have, let's say, millions of PDF documents. But now you can have that, actually use that to build your own custom models and then serve those models internally within your own organization and deploy it as an API endpoint. And by the way, you can have all of this is managed. You can have multiple models with multiple access controls. You can have, for example, going back to the RAG model, let's say I'm going to ask a question based on some internal documents. I want to ask a question, but maybe I'm not the authorized user to know some answers. So how do I control for that? And this is what this complete control actually, when you're deploying within this paradigm, actually helps you. That now that you have your data is managed using Unity Catalog, and your models are managed using the same kind of model. So that streamlines this kind of control that you want to have. Next, when you're looking at the production quality. So when you're looking at the cycle of a Gen AI application, you start from, let's say if you are building your own model, you are building a model, you are doing some deployment of the model. Then what comes next is that you are going to train the model, and based off that, then you're exposing the model, you are doing the data ingestion, it goes back to the model building, and so on and so forth. So this is the pattern. Basically, a lot of models, for example, OpenAI, ChatGPT, there is a RLHF, real reinforcement learning with human feedback is happening, that it always improves the model. When you are going to train or fine-tune a model internally, you want to have that too. So this is why Databricks stack and Lakehouse, we have the solution for data ingestion. You build a model, and then you can deploy the model as an endpoint, and then you have the feedback and all of this monitored within the system, and can use that feedback to train the model again, to retrain and improve accuracy. And all of it basically boils down to having your data within, bringing your model in your stack. And also you can control for toxicity, hallucination. All of this is something that it is managed within by getting the feedback and putting it back to your data that is used for training. And finally, it is at lowering the cost. So this plot actually is a really interesting chart that shows the cost that on Mosaic ML that they used for training Stable Diffusion. So Stable Diffusion, as you know, it's one of those models that it's text to image model, open source. So they initially, training this model in September 2022, it's an order of the cost of $600K. When the team at Mosaic actually trained this, and a couple of months later, they brought the cost down to $160,000 for training the Stable Diffusion model from scratch. And then later, as you see, these timelines are decreasing, and the drop is going. This is actually beating the Moore's law. You're seeing a lot more cheaper with 50K. Now at this level, as you can see, this training and fine-tuning is accessible to many organizations now. So now within the budget, and now more recently it's half of that, like in order of 20K, you can actually train a stable diffusion model on your own data that you have for your own task. And this is a very big important aspect of LLMs, is that you can build your agents. You have expert systems, you have your own data, you can retrain them, fine tune them, and have that in your data. And also, it's not only on the training side, on the serving side too, it is very cost effective to use the platform. So to wrap up, when we are looking at uh, the the maturity of Gen AI applications within and workloads within the enterprise. So this chart shows from left to right, and it is in the order of increasing complexity, but also increasing competitiveness. All right, so with that, I would like to pass it to my colleague Veysel, who will be talking about implementing a RAG system for biomedical Q&A using John Snow Labs and Databricks.
Thanks, Samir. Hey everyone, this is Veysel from Johnson Labs. I am the head of data science at Johnson Labs, leading the healthcare NLP team for the last 3 years. So today we are going to build a RAG architecture to build a clinical chatbot by using the open source tool provided by Johnson Labs and Databricks. So everything that you are going to see today, especially on the coding session, because I will start with the slides and then move into Databricks notebooks. I'm trying to stick to the open source tools and libraries so that you can replicate everything on your end. Welcome to the session. These are the most capable LLM out there, but they still, even the GPT-4 itself is 40% of the answering the 40% of the questions incorrectly. We call it, as you know, it's called hallucination or not grounding the answers. So if you are asking out of the box questions without basing anything else, most of the time, like the ratio is 40% of the questions is answered incorrectly. The worst part of this is that you may never know which one is correct, which one is not. Of course, this is going to get better again and again, but even with the other competitors of OpenAI like Anthropic, Cohere, etc., the models suffer still from hallucination, and it's an active research area, by the way, which is probably going to be resolved in the upcoming years. But we, like healthcare institutions or every companies out there, not just the healthcare, have some internal documents already that you have been gathering for maybe decades, right? Maybe you have some rules, internal rules, or maybe you have some hand-created data set that is gathered by the domain experts, and then you have been using this even before the LLM era, even before the machine learning era. Now, what if we utilize everything that we learn from LLMs and from our own in-house rules and documents, and then build an architecture so that we can talk to our documents, knowledge bases, in a way that we talk to ChatGPT or LLMs, right? So that's where RAG comes into play, because it's a way to introduce the context from your own documents into an LLM, so that you don't use LLM's its own memory, its own knowledge. You just use LLM as an orchestrator or as a smart assistant over there to answer the question given the context that is extracted from the vector DBs through RAG. So that's the one sentence summary of what RAG is all about. So we basically enriching the prompts. So because we ask a question to LLM based on a knowledge base, so while asking this question, we enrich the prompt with a mix of context, historical data, and up-to-date information, which is going to be updated again and again because of the natural life cycle of your business, right? And when you club them together and then ask a question to LLM and then give some system prompt by saying that, okay, just use the context that I'm going to give you. Do not use your own knowledge. And if you don't know this, don't ask for it. Like this kind of instructions when you give it. You, first of all, have a richer prompt, right? With additional context. And then you give LLM a chance to see more insights than its own knowledge base. So, and then you make sure that the hallucination is reduced as much as possible. And then the role of LLM is reduced as well, because the role of LLM in a RAG architecture is is there to create a one synthesized answer given the n number of contexts, and then trying to answer your questions in a way that you could get from any human being. That is the beauty of LLM in RAG architecture. So we are not trying to rely on its own knowledge. But even so, LLMs can still hallucinate even if you give them a strict instructions and then context. It may still, which I'm going to cover in a bit. So how this work? So we basically LLMs have RAG architectures have five stages. Basically, it starts with ingestion. Like ingestion is you have a created data, you have or raw data. It doesn't have to be created. You have PDFs, TXT, PowerPoint, docx, even audio and video files. Everything can be vectorized, right? So you split them in a meaningful chunk so that embedding stage can generate an embeddings out of this split, right? That's why the first stage is how you are going to split the data. That's the most important stage, which means that if you split in a way that has nothing to do with the domain that you are working with, maybe the documents or the documents that you have, maybe the sections why splitting is would make more sense, or in some sort of documents, for example, like a financial disclosure forms, maybe the table extraction at first and then splitting by section and then adding the headers to each split would make much more sense. So it's more of an art right now rather than just splitting by letters or words, right? So that's why the first stage is basically should be handled by the by someone who is working on this document on a daily basis, so that he can introduce his own insights to let the data scientist or the developer to do this process. The second step is you get the embeddings, which is the most expensive part maybe, because the embeddings is there to find the contextual meaning of that split, because you have the split at first and then you get the embeddings of each split, which means that the embeddings that you are using over there should be capable enough to understand the context given the neighboring context, and should have a larger context window that your splits shouldn't overflow your context. You like, if the input size of an embedding, like an input context limit of the embeddings model that you are going to use over there is like just 300 tokens or 500 tokens, and if you split by 1000 token, you are going to lose the half of it, right? So that's why the embeddings that you are going to use should be compatible with the split size that you decided at the beginning of your pipeline. And what we do is that when you write this into a vector DB, when you have the embeddings of each split, you write all of them into a vector DB with all the metadata that you can append, right? Maybe the name of the document, date of the document, order of the document, etc., or the path of the document, right? So how does work in the retrieval part? You ask a question, and then by using the same embeddings model, the embeddings of the query is tried to map with the embeddings of all this context within the DB. So vector DB is usually using some clustering algorithms over there. There are very different algorithms to do this. It's just basically try to return top similar splits given your query embeddings. As you see, it's very naive, right? Because we get the embeddings of the question and try to map it with the embeddings of the entire split. So this is not a perfect solution, as you say, and this is a very naive approach. That's why trying to get the embeddings of the query is itself another art, right? Maybe you can expand your query, maybe you extract the keywords from your query and keywords from the split, and then you try to map this. But let's keep it simple. The idea is to, given the embeddings of the query, finding the most similar splits from your entire millions of documents and splits in the vector DB. Then we create one prompt with the like my query and number of splits, and then we send it to the LLM and say that given the context splits that I'm going to give you, answer the following question. And then that is the simplest prompt maybe. Of course, we also add some guardrail verbally and say that, okay, don't use your own knowledge. If you don't know the answer, just say I don't know, etc. You can add too many different tones, and you can even add some citations by giving this kind of prompts, depending on the capability of your LLM, of course. So as you see, LLM's role over there is in just digesting one single answer given the n number of splits and then the query. But RAG, as I said, have 5 different stages, and each stage requires special attention. As a developer, you need to pay attention, right? And then you can make a difference. It's like a black and white, because you can just create a RAG architecture right now by using Haystack, LangChain, Llama Index. It's just like less than 10 lines of code. But it is not happening in real world, right? Like you can create a RAG with 10 lines of code by using all these wrapper libraries, but how to split, how to embed, how to which LLM or vector DB to use, these are all going to change the nature of the final outcome and then the business value that you are going to get from RAG architecture. So the first step that you can make a difference is how to create your source document. You can pre-process in a different way. You can select different OCR engines. Johnson Controls has a visual NLP library for this, for example. You can find other techniques out there. You may want to do some basic cleaning, formatting, because not all of the documents, majority of the documents maybe are not in a TXT format, right? You need to move them into a TXT format, of course. If it is audio or video, you can get an embeddings of them as well, or you can just get the transcription of the video or audio and then get the text embeddings again. You need to extract the metadata. That is the second most important step, which means that because when you read as a human a document, you use the metadata inherently, right? You don't even notice that you are using it, but it's most important. Even the name of the file is important most of the time regarding on what is written inside the document. And maybe you need to, of course, you need to treat each part of the document in a different way, which means that if there's a table, you need to apply some visual NLP techniques to find the table and extract the insight. And if it is just a larger context, and then your embeddings cannot handle it, or you want to reduce the size of the vector DB, you can even summarize, etc. These are the techniques in the source documents. The second step is document splitting, because there are different splitting strategies given the type of the documents or given the domain that you are working in. Because maybe some of the documents, as I mentioned before, needs to be handled in a context aware, maybe section aware, maybe task based. Maybe you wanna find the header information at first, split the document into section, and then put the header back into the section text again and again, or just add this section information into a metadata so that you can utilize later, or you change the length of the char or length of the token when you are splitting. In Johnson Controls library, we have 2 different splitting modules, which I'm going to cover in the notebook, that you can even split sentence by sentence, token by token, or section by section, or entity by entity. Like this is quite important, because whatever gets into LLM, it gets out, right? So that's why if you send weak content, the LLM will probably try to make up some answers. That's why you may even notice that the answer is coming from LLM itself, not the knowledge base, if there is not enough information over there. The third stage is split embeddings, because there are many different embeddings model out there, and luckily, most of the open source embeddings models are doing way better than the other licensed or commercial embeddings model that is provided by OpenAI or other companies, right? So that's why this it is really good to see that one of the most important stage of RAG architecture can be handled by open source embeddings models. The embeddings model that you choose over there should be scalable, faster, more context aware, and maybe even fine-tuned on your own domain so that it can get the most out of your documents, rather than just using any other, the average of the token embeddings, right? It could even be fine-tuned on your own documents. The fourth stage is vector DB. Vector DBs, there are still many open source and licensed like commercial vector DBs out there. The idea is to store all the embeddings of this split in one place, and then so that when you get the embeddings of the query, you can find the most similar ones. So the vector DB is more or less doing the same job right now, whatever you see. Of course, when you try to do this with the 100 million documents, probably most of the open source vector DBs, like toy ones, I'm not going to give a name, the toy ones will probably fail. So you may want to use some production ready one like an Elasticsearch or some other or just like Amir mentioned, there are some managed vector DBs out there provided by Databricks too. Over there, retrieval strategy is more important. Like the first issue is because you can do just KNN over there, or you can use some BM25, like some just finding the keywords and then using the statistics of the keyword and then the extract. You can even do some query expansion to add more information to a query embeddings rather than just getting the embeddings of the query and embeddings of the split, because they may not be similar, right? Because this question form is different than the like a paragraph form. And another more important part of this is that you need to do some post-processing, right? Because LLMs, like VectorDB will return top K, similar one, given what you said as K, parameter K, but you may need to reorder them. You may need to filter them out based on some criteria. Maybe you only want to deal with certain type of documents by using the metadata. That's why VectorDB selection is highly important, because some VectorDBs do not allow to do metadata filtering before doing the search. And then the last part is LLM. LLM part is, even if the role of LLM is small within this entire architecture, if the previous stages fail, and then if you are using a high parameter large LLMs, it may tend to hallucinate, and then you may not even notice the answer coming from the rack is coming from the LLM itself, not the rack, not your knowledge base, right? That's why you need the LLM that you have should have some guardrails, should do some instruction following, shouldn't try to make up the answer, even sometimes cite the answer if it's needed. And it needs to have a proper context size, because the open source ones usually less than 5,000 token. The one that people are using, like Llama 2, for example, is right now 4,096, I guess. While the other commercial LLMs can go up to 100K. Right, but it doesn't mean that it's going to ingest all these tokens, because there are some concepts like lost in the middle, that the larger the context that you feed in, the models tend to forget what's happening between two ends. And then there are some prompt template that might work on one LLM, may not work on another LLM. That's why your prompt should be tuned based on the LLM that you are using. Imagine that we are building a RAG on-prem right now, because the idea here is that right now today in the notebook, I'm going to show how to build a local RAG architecture using open source tools provided by Databricks and Johnson OS library, like powered by Spark NLP library. So if you want to build a PubMed RAG, PubMed chatbot, there are like around 35 million abstracts just by using the abstract, because you can use more than this, of course. But let's make it simple, just abstract, like a 1 paragraph or 2 paragraph, right? So this leads to around like 100 million segments, which means you need to store 100 million embeddings, because you need to split each abstract, right, like into three part, let's say, 3 splits. Then this results roughly 25 billion tokens. So, and then when you try to get an embeddings using some managed embedding services, the cost may just embeddings this splits would even cost around like 10,000, right? Not including storage fees. And then there is also another, like 10,000 cost is like just if you are using some managed DB to every month, and then this is just a subscription, or this is just the usage cost. But when you try to get an embeddings of all these splits and then write into a vector DB, so just to gathering the embeddings part is more than 100K. These are just rough like back of the envelope calculation, right? So it's more than $100,000 just for generating embeddings. And if you did the wrong decision and then pick the wrong embeddings, you need to do this again and again. And regardless, like, let alone the price and the cost that we are talking about, the embeddings collection is the most expensive part in terms of like computation power as well as the time, is the most time consuming part of the entire RAG architecture. Because if you have 100 million ciblets, the gathering embeddings from 100 million ciblets would take days or weeks, right? And then the last part is the LLM part. If you are using some managed LLM, it's going to cost you a lot as well. But everything that I've mentioned to you can be done on-prem, actually. If you are not trying to scale to like 100 million, of course, because there are some solutions that Amir also mentioned in Databricks. At Johnson Controls, we also have some solutions for this that you can ship into your on-prem and then run behind firewalls. So popular popular RAG frameworks, wrappers out there, as we all know, like the most popular ones are LangChain, Haystack, and Llama Index. They are doing basically more or less same. They have different features. Most of them, like all of them, usually use the same logic, right? The idea is that following the steps that I explained so far, and then doing this by writing less code. That's why they are like they are abstracting away all these details for the users, for the developers, so that you can build your own RAG framework without any hassle. At Johnson Labs, what we did is that we did something like to allow everyone like to use all like keep using these popular frameworks. All the libraries that we have, we already have one single library that cover all these libraries. Okay, we at Johnson Labs we have like 5 to 6 different libraries. Some of them are open source, some of them are licensed. The most popular ones is like healthcare NLP and visual NLP libraries. They are licensed small libraries. They are all depending on the open source Spark NLP library. So which means that we have an open source Spark NLP library that is depending on Spark itself, Apache Spark itself, and that's the only NLP library over there, which is downloaded more than 80 million times. Spark NLP itself downloaded more than 80 million times so far. So the idea over that we wrote one single library, Johnson Labs, like pip install Johnson Labs, and it can you can use all these libraries within this one single library. Of course, NLP test became lang test, so it is not included in the library. But and then NLP Lab is a separate product, which is not a library as well. Llama Index integration is not there, so we did an integration for LangChain and Haystack. Llama Index will be done soon, very soon, by the way. That so that you can use the existing framework with whatever we offer, which I'm going to cover. Like you import LLM from Johnson Labs, and then for the embedding retrieval, for example, in LangChain, you just import Johnson Labs LangChain embedder and then pick the model name, and then you will be able to use the rest of the stages in LangChain, which means that you don't need to break anything, you don't need to give up on anything that you have already been using, because we are just trying to replace the most expensive part at the first stage, like embeddings collection. We also do the splitting part and DB part as well, but let's just focus on embeddings part, which I'm going to cover the splitting part as well in the notebook. So you just pick any, and everything that you pick over there, the embeddings, is going to run on Spark clusters. So that would make the difference, right? The biggest difference. If you are going to process 100 million simplets, try to gather embeddings from all out of these simplets, you cannot just do this in one single machine, right? You need a cluster, which is going to change the entire landscape. And the difference between collecting embeddings in Spark ecosystem versus in a single machine. Let's just do this comparison between Spark NLP versus Hugging Face, like a most popular libraries out there to collect embeddings, right? So the blue bar, like the embeddings that I'm talking about, they are all open source, and as you see on the leaderboard, sentence embeddings leaderboard, OpenAI its own 10 sentence embeddings is not even in top 10, right? Which means that there are open source embeddings, as I mentioned before, that you can use with some quite nice performance actually. If you compare on this chart, Spark NLP based Onyx runtime, so because we have the Onyx version of each embeddings as well, and then when you compare these two libraries on embeddings collection over, let's say 1,000 document. Over 1,000 document, Spark NLP is doing 2 times better than Hugging Face. And if we do the quantized version of this, it is 3 times better. Like as quantized embeddings in Spark NLP is 3 times better than, this is all CPU, by the way. right? So when you do this in a 1 million, right, 1 million, like 100,000 documents, actually it is 6 times better, right? And in the 50,000 documents, it is 8 times, like 7 times better, which means that you can make a difference. This is by the way single machine. This is not even a cluster. Okay, I'm just talking about the single machine performance right now. Now if you want to see the cluster performance, which is totally different, right? So why? uh, because when you add more worker to the cluster, you can parallelize all this embeddings collection in a Spark cluster, and then in Spark NLP, it is natively scaled over the cluster, right? You don't need to do anything at all. So if I compare this, the same logic, like 1 million documents, let's say, if I want to process 1 million document in a 16 worker Spark cluster, it takes 3 minutes in Spark NLP, while it takes 43 minutes in a single node machine, which means that anyone who is using the single node machines, like a single machines, will not be able to utilize this speed up, right? It is more than 10 times better right now if you are using Spark cluster at Databricks, EMR, Dataproc, right? All the Spark frameworks, you will be able to get like 10 times better embeddings collection. For the vector DB, which one to pick? There are many vector DBs out there. Some of them are commercial. Some of them are the ones that we already know, like Neo4j, MongoDB. They also added this kind of vector DB capability, like vector capable NoSQL databases. And the most popular ones are, as you see on the upper left corner, like a Pinecone, Quadrant, like Milvus, etc. Right? So most of them are open source, that you can use for free, but like most of them also have some managed services as well that you need to pay, of course, if you want to scale further. But there are some in-memory vector libraries that you can also use. Even the NumPy, you can use NumPy itself like an in-memory array as a vector DB as well. You don't even need to store anything. Or you can just use files by Meta, which I'm going to use today during the live coding session. But the idea here is that you can gather the embeddings of each split and then write into this vector DB. And then you try to find the most similar split given the query embeddings. That's why vector DB hosts one of the most important stages here. So which LLM to pick? We can answer this question in two angles. The first one is QA with RAG architecture, like which LLM to pick when it comes to RAG, because the role of LLM is different in RAG than the other purposes. If you are just doing open-ended discussions with LLM, Q&A with LLM, the choice might differ, right? Like the results will be definitely different. So Q&A with RAG, which we are going to cover today, there's we can sort this by the context adherence score. What does that mean? Like, because you give some context, so you expect LLM to stick to this context rather than making it up or using its own knowledge, right? That's why it shouldn't hallucinate. It should stick to the context that you provide. So context relatedness or adherence, let's call it. When you sort them out, GPT-4, the most capable one, is like now 0.76, which means that there's still 25% chance that the LLM will not stick to the context that you provide over there. And when it comes to open source, like Zephyr is based on Mistral, right? So it is even the 7 billion version of Zephyr, which is doing really well actually in the RAG architecture. That's why I'm going to use Zephyr and Llama today. Please forgive my pronunciation if you are using like if I'm calling these models name in a different way. But the Fire 7B is already doing really well compared to other like Llama 2 70 billion, which means that you don't need to have a 70 billion LLM just to answer the question given the context. Probably very soon there will be some 1 billion version of these kind of models that could only be specifically tuned for LLMs. There are some papers about this, of course, that you can even use without worrying much, because the LLM's role in RAG is not that big, as you know. If you are, unless you are doing some, some reasoning task within the context that you are discussing. So, and closed book Q&A, if you are doing without RAG, right? You just ask question, like ask it to write code, like the one that you use on ChatGPT 3.5, right? Without any context, without any external knowledge base. Llama 2 70 billion is doing better compared to other open source models, but the Fear 7b is still doing better over there, which can fit. Why am I focusing on 7b? Because you can fit it into your own memory on single machine, and then use and then test without relying on any third-party managed services, right? And I'm going to use the quantized version of Zephyr and Llama 2 today. So the impact of tuning all these 5 stages, the difference is between with and without tuning is like black and white sometimes, right? And sometimes, if you are not doing this really well, if there is nothing special with your documents, of course, the difference may not be that much, right? So if you compare this with and without tuning in RAG, or like which embeddings to choose, which vector DB to choose, how to post-process, how to rank them, etc., the differences between that is like just the context relevancy. It is like twice, right? So don't focus on the numbers itself, metrics itself, but the differences between before and after, because there are different ways of measuring this. I use Ragax to evaluate the to calculate these benchmarks. I basically try to calculate the faithfulness, context recall, context relevancy, etc. And then the green bar represents what you could achieve compared to the vanilla version of RAG without tuning anything. Okay. So, but no LLM, no RAG application can answer this question alone. The following question that you see on your screen in the medical context, right? Because if you have 100, like 1 million patients and 100 million reports belonging to that patients in a timeline, if you want to find the patient given the following query, like give me all the patients who have type 2 diabetes using drug X for the last X years, and also recently diagnosed something, right? So if you want to answer this question, RAG cannot do this, LLM cannot do this. So you need like knowledge graph base or like text to SQL, text to Cipher, this kind of solutions, which at Johnson Alves we already do on a daily basis. We have our own medical chatbot that is working on this concept, by the way. If there's a time, I can also cover, but there was another webinar just dedicated to medical chatbot product, which you will get the URL to the workshop, because all these notebooks and all this code is going to be shared under Databricks workshop, like Databricks own solution accelerator repo, which you are going to get the links as well, of course, right? And at the end of this notebook, you will be able to get answers to your question, as you can see on the left-hand side. I'm going to use 2 different knowledge bases. The first one is PubMed abstract. The second one is clinical guidelines. Okay. This is a Databricks environment, which I already have a cluster, a nice cluster, as you see on the upper right corner. This is like I have 4 workers Spark cluster. The like a driver node is 32, and then the worker is 128, each like 32 core. So now this cluster is already I'm just going to install everything that you see here, which is already like the cluster is already live, which I'm going to just skip the installation part. I need some basic libraries like transformer libraries, Johnson Alves libraries, LangChain, FAIS, and datasets library. The idea here is that everything that you see here is open source libraries, right? I'm going to use OpenAI endpoint. I'm not going to use in the notebook, but I share the code so that if you want to use OpenAI endpoint, GPT endpoint, you can also use the same notebook. But I'm going to load local open source LLMs during this session, and then you will be able to get answers through them. So let's start the session. Like the first one is when you have the Johnson Knowledge Library. When you start it, you will have a Spark session over there, which is loading everything that you have. If you have the license library as well, healthcare and NLP library as well, you will it will load the corresponding jars, corresponding library into the cluster as well, which you need to set beforehand, of course. Right now, I have the Johnson Knowledge Library already installed. Now I started the session and it is right now ready to. So LangChain integration that I mentioned before, in this notebook, I'm going to use LangChain. We have a haystack integration as well, and Llama index integration is coming up as well. So in the LangChain integration, we replace two stages. The first stage is splitting part. The second stage is embeddings part, which means that there is an ingestion, splitting, embeddings, vector DB, and LLM parts, right? We replace two parts right now. The ingestion part is also replaced. So we replace like 3 out of 5 parts right now because the ingestion will be done by Spark itself in this notebook. So we why did we name it like this? The idea over there is that you should be able to still use your own LangChain or haystack pipeline rather than taking like moving the data again and again between pipelines, and it wouldn't be efficient, right? That's why we wanted to develop these kind of modules so that you can just plug and play into your existing workflow without worrying much. So how does this work? We just replicated the same splitting that LangChain did over that. This is open source splitter. So that's why we replicated everything that they already have. Why? Because this is a Spark data frame that you need to split. And then if you have the licensed version of Johnson Knowledge Library, we have a custom document splitter, which is specifically designed in a flexible and robust way to handle medical contexts because of the needs that we have in the medical domain, right? Maybe you want to split some pattern, split by section, split by sentence, split by token. You need to add some custom bound strategy. You need to split by certain phrases that you may not find in other libraries, open source libraries. That's why this notebook, I'm not going to use custom document splitter. I'm going to use the open source version of it. But if you want to have more flexibility, and if you are not happy with your splitting strategy, you can just easily use custom document splitter, which would allow you to use many different features out of the box. Okay, so and then I'm going to use John Snow Labs LangChain embedder, which like all these embeddings, BERT or E5 or OLMPNet, you can use out of the box as if you are using Transformers library, but it's going to be used within Spark cluster. That's why the notation will be just like Spark NLP itself. Then and then we are going to write this into a FIS vector DB, and then we will build the retriever via LangChain and then run the flow. So let's download. Like the first step is I have some PubMed data, like 1,000 abstracts that I already collect from diabetes related PubMed articles. I'm only going to use the abstract. You can use the other discussion and conclusion sections as well in our medical chatbot at Johnson Knowledge. We already have them, by the way. So now let's just write them into imagine that this data already resides in your Databricks, right, as a delta table. Now I'm going to simulate that one. This is a delta table, like this is a table. Now I'm going to write this as a delta table to a Databricks. And now when I read this, it's going to be a Spark data frame, which means that it is right now distributed data frame that you can just run over the worker nodes rather than trying to like this is a toy data set, by the way. Imagine that you are doing this with 1 million documents. That's why otherwise in a single mission you will not be able to utilize all the cores, right? If you don't use some distributed data format like Parquet or delta tables. So now I'm writing the data frame as a into a delta table format. Now I'm going to read this and then load with PySpark data frame loader provided by LangChain. So now the this part is ready. Let's read this. When I read this, it is the, like, I'm just showing the top 10 rows, right? Let's see. And now I have the 5 column data frame. So I have the PubMed ID, abstract, which I'm going to vectorize and split and vectorize. I have some metadata, like a publication date, title of the title of the abstract, like title of the document, article, and then the journal name. As you see, I'm not even using the title in the vectors, right? There might be a technique which we sometimes apply, using the title information, getting the embeddings of the metadata along with the metadata of the split as well. There are some techniques to gather more relevant documents, but I'm not going to use any of these right now. I'm going to deal with the abstract, and all the other columns will be metadata. Now, LangChain comes with some PySpark data frame loader, which the data frame that we already have over there, I can just load this into a LangChain right now by using PySpark data frame loader. Now I have the documents. Documents means that now I converted this into a document data format, which is in the LangChain or Haystack. It adds some metadata, some page content information. So it's like a structured document information. Each document is converted into this format right now. So you have the page content and then the bunch of metadata. So this is same regardless of you use Spark or not, right? Even if you do this in Colab, you will end up with this structure right now. Now let's check the metadata of each document. So the first document, the metadata of the first document is, as you've seen, so which we can use this metadata to filter my search, to optimize my search later on. So right now I have 1000 document. Now I can just gather embeddings, like embeddings of like split. Let's at first split and then gather the embeddings. I'm going to pick only like 500 charts, and then chunk overlap is 50, so that each split has some overlap to keep the context, right? Because splitters work in a different way than you could imagine, so that you need to give more context with overlap. These parameters, everything that you see here is a tunable parameter, which means that this may not work on your use case. That's why we have custom splitter that you can split regardless of the chunk size. You can split by sentences. Maybe you don't want to cut the sentences into half, or you want to just split by the word token size rather than a simple token size. So then what I'm going to do is that I am going to split the 1000 documents into 500 charts, and then I will end up with n number of splits over there, and then I will try to collect embeddings for each one of them. So right now it is splitters that my Spark cluster is being used right now to split each document, which is a simple process actually. And then I'm going to use the same clusters to collect the embeddings. Let's not wait till it's finished, right? And then show how to gather the embeddings. Once you have the splits, each splits will be text right now, like text means like n number of splits generated from splitter. Now I'm going to load embeddings from Johnson Knowledge library. So I'm going to use instructor base embeddings. Instructor base is one of the most capable embeddings model, which is small and faster and capable, like as good as maybe OpenAI embeddings that you can use as an open source model, right? So I'm going to load this with Johnson Knowledge library, and it is less than 400 MB. And then now I'm going to, like, the idea is that getting an embedding, like gathering an embeddings of any query that you might fit. Then, as you see, I have around 4,500 splits generated out of 1000 split, right? So it's still splitting right now. So there will be like maybe 5 times more splits than the original document size. Now, when I gather the embeddings, once I have the embeddings of each split, I will write this into a vector DB. So LangChain already comes with some pre-built modules that you can use different open source vector DBs. Let's use Faiz over there. I just imported Faiz from the vector stores and then embed all my This is where the embeddings process happens, by the way, because I feed the ciblets and embeddings from Johnson Wallace library. Now I'm going to collect embeddings for each ciblets and then write into a vector DB, which is files here. Then I'm going to use this vector DB as a retriever part. Retriever part is the where that you retrieve the information given the embeddings query, right? So now I said, okay, return top 10. Return top 10 means that return top 10 similar ciblets from this vector DB given the embeddings of my question, my query, right? Then if you want to save this, for example, I just like generating this is 1 minute, by the way. So 4,500 ciblets embeddings can be generated in 1 minute in Databricks that I'm using right now, the classes that I'm using right now. As you see, I just did this before the webinar. It took 1 minute to generate 4,500 embeddings using instructor base. And when I did the same at Colab, it is like 27 minutes, because Colab is a small machine, 2 CPU, 12 gig memory, right? But we can just compare the same with Hugging Face as well on the same machine, which I'm going to run right now. So you can just save this once you have the, because this is most expensive part, right? Most time consuming and expensive part. Once you have the vector DB, you can save this to your local, and then you can just retrieve later on or load later on. What I did over there is that like I uploaded this to our repo, Johnson Alves workshop repo, that you can download as well if you don't want to spend time for this. You will see the URL within the notebook. For example, this one is already, I already uploaded this into the workshop repo that you will be able to find in Databricks and Johnson Alves workshop reports. Anyway, this is how you load. Imagine I already wrote, imagine you just downloaded and then load into the vector DB. Now I'm going to use this as a retriever, and from now on I can find the most similar, I can find the most similar ciblets given any query that I would write here, right? So it's called like get relevant documents. When you just type like get relevant documents and your query, it's going to find the top 10 most similar ciblets given this query. As you see, it returned top 10 document. Some of them are short. As you see, this is just as short as this one. Looks like some of the ciblets are very short, which may like this is already a not the entire, even not the entire sentence, right? So that's why the splitting part is too important, that you need to make sure that you have enough context to give to LLM. Anyway, now it returned top 10. The next step is I'm going to create a query and then send to LLM, right? So that LLM can answer this question. LLM is going to answer this question using the content, like a page content from each split, like 10 of them, and then answer one question, like return one answer, right? Maybe it's going to say that some says this, but the second paragraph says this, etc. Maybe it's going to return something like this. But the idea is that letting LLM to see the entire context. As you see, if this is too big, right? If this is like, if you return 10, usually people return 3 or 5, by the way. If you try to fit 10 ciblets and the size of the ciblets are already high, the LLM will probably not able to do well, because it's not going to accept all of them because of the context limit. Now, this is the return document, like 10 top documents with their title and journal name. Now I have the results from the retriever part given my query. But as you see, it's still too naive, right? So I just found the top similar ciblets. Maybe there are some repetitive context in the vector DB. Maybe some of the documents are very similar, but I need some diversity over there, which means that I don't want very similar documents clubbed together. I want maybe some dissimilar one, but still similar to my query, right? That's why I need to enrich the context a bit. That's why there are some diversity techniques. LangChain already applies one of them. Haystack has another diversity technique, rankers, that you can specify the diversity by setting some, like playing with some some parameter. For example, here, the more closer to zero, it's called lambda mode. The more closer to zero, it's more diverse, which means that it's not just returning top similar. When you apply this, it's going to return a little bit different than if you compare. Most of them will not end up in the second, because when you increase the diversity, it's going to pick from the other splits that may not end up into top 10 given the similarity, vector similarity, right? This is one of the techniques. Another technique is dealing with lost in the middle issue. Lost in the middle is that if you have a larger context, this is one of the popular papers published this year, by the way. The idea is that when you have a larger context and then send it to LLM, just like we sometimes human do, right? When you read a 100-page document or 3-page document and then ask a question in the middle, you usually remember what you read at the first and what you read at the end. So that's why in LLM, surprisingly, the information in the middle is usually get lost, and then LLMs may not be able to answer the question or digest the information that happened to be in between the documents, between the splits, right? That's why you may want to, rather than sending 10 splits to the LLM as a context, you may want to reorder it, which means that rather than sending, let me show you the explanation. Rather than sending 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, right? You can send 1, 2, 3, 4. You can just add the most important documents at two ends, so that the least important ones will appear in the middle of this sequence, so that LLM, even if it fails to grab these documents, we would still not lose anything, right? Because the most important parts are already put at the beginning and at the end of my sequence, so that LLM can understand or recall more. So when you do this, there are one-liner codes for this in LangChain, and Haystack also has this, by the way. You can just resort your, re-rank and sort your input context and then send to LLM. That's the second technique that you may want to play with. There are, of course, many different techniques, right? Especially on the splitting part. Maybe you extract the title of each paragraph or section headers, and then whatever that split comes, you just add this section header at top of the paragraph split, let's say. This is also another technique which we sometimes use, so that we would know where it comes from. Maybe you have one paragraph that is discussing some symptoms or the chief complaints or the patient history when you admit the patient, right, as a physician to your clinic. Over there, if you split that large paragraph family history into 3 pieces, and if you lose the title, history title over there, the second and third split will probably not have this information. And if you ask a question about patient history, the LLM will not be able to understand that it's coming from the family section. That's why sometimes we put that information at the top of each subsplit, or sometimes we use this information as a metadata, and then we say that, okay, only check these sections, or only return my answer, only pick the splits from the certain sections given the metadata. So BM25 is another technique which is very cheap, and then it's just using the frequency of the words in both the corpus that you written in the DB and then the specific document under consideration. So it's very effective, by the way. Despite this being cheap, it's very effective, that you can use by itself, or you can just use, because this is just a retriever part. You don't need there is no DB here, as you see, right? There is no DB because you just send your text into and there's no embeddings at all, by the way. It is just you extract you calculate the statistics of each words within the entire corpora, and then retriever's job over there is that, given the query tokens, returning the most similar splits, which again there is no embeddings, and that's why it's very cheap. So and it returns different set of documents, of course, because of different techniques. Then you can ensemble both. there is an ensembler over there that you can use, like some rank BM25 and FIES together, and then you could have FIES retriever and BM25 retriever, and then you can use both in a hybrid approach. They call it hybrid approach. So for the FIES, for example, if I want to get relevant documents with this causes of diabetes query, I get these documents like 10. If I do the same with BM25, I get this. So if you see the first document here is that ending with like 8125 from Korean Journal of Radiology. Here, the first document is from another journal. So it returns different results, right? If I just check the first document, it's going to be different than the other one. So if I want to use this together, I can just assign some weights, and then so that I can use ensemble retriever to utilize both. This is called hybrid approach, as I mentioned before. So let's compare the speed with Hugging Face. I'm still on the embeddings and vector DB part, right? I didn't get into LLM part yet. So if I want to collect the embeddings with Hugging Face in the same cluster using the same machine that you are seeing right now, same cluster, same Databricks environment that you see right now on CPU, right now, because I'm just using the same embeddings, by the way, which I need to install another library to be able to use instructor embeddings. If I do this, it takes 5 minutes, 24 seconds. With the Johnson Olaf's embedder, it is 1 minute, right? It says right now, the way that we do in cluster is 5 times faster, of course, because we are utilizing the entire cluster and workers. So if you, as you remember from my slides, it was like more than 10 times faster in 16 worker cluster for 1 million documents, right? So that's why it's something that you need to consider all the time. If you are going to play with different embeddings techniques again and again, you can just fire up some cluster on Databricks or EMR, and then you will be able to collect your embeddings and kill the machine, so that you don't need to deal with this embeddings collection part again and again. So just the comparison, I'm going to use GPT 3.5 for LLM stage, just to show how it looks like, because maybe you still want to use this. But on your prem, since this is your sensitive information, right, you will definitely not be able to use. Of course, there are some enterprise solutions over there as well, but maybe just for the experimentation, you want to use open source LLMs or maintain this. At Johnson Controls, we have our own LLM that is powering our own medical chatbot, which I will try to cover at the end. But if you want to use OpenAI as an LLM stage here, it is as easy as this, okay, from LangChain. You will just load your key and then pick the model name and then set some parameter for consistency or diversity. And then you will be able to just build your chain. Build your chain means that I'm going to use retrieval Q&A chain here, which is the straightforward one. Over there, I basically pick which LLM that I'm going to use. Like LLM is equal to LLM, which I already created here, like initiate here, and then retriever part is the FIES retriever that I already populated, right? And then I will also return with the answer the source document, so to see where these answers comes from at the end, not citing. Then I ask this question and get this answer, which means that when I ask this question to my RAG architecture, now I completed the RAG right now. This QA chain is going to be used as an interface to my RAG architecture right now. I'm going to ask a question, and then this chain is going to generate embeddings of this query by using the retriever, because retriever part already knows which embeddings to use, right? That I specified above. It's going to get the embeddings of this query, and then send it to the vector DB, gather the most similar one, top key, and then combine all of them, and then wrap around the prompt, system prompt, and then send to the LLM and gather the answer. And then this is how it looks like. So out of 1,000 PubMed abstract, when we index it properly, when you ask this question, this is what you get out of this. Okay, so it took like 22 seconds, it says, which means that it covers the embeddings collection part of this as well, and it is using LLM, which means that all this top key The top K documents are sent to LLM right now, and then the one single answer is generated by using this content. Maybe none of them is used. We may never know, right? So that's why there are some RAG evaluation libraries, methods over there that could be another topic for another webinar, maybe. So this answer is generated by this source document because I wanted to return the source document as well. And as you see, I have all these source documents returned over there, and then you can also like these are 10 different splits coming from. For example, this one is coming from this article and this journal, and this is maybe one paragraph over there or a few sentences over there. So because looks like DB thought that this is very similar to the query that I ask right now. Then LLM's job is to create one single answer. So we have some system prompt, as I said before, right? System prompt is that there is some wrapper prompt that we send to LLM. We basically send to LLM say all these split and say that use the following pieces of the context to answer the user's question. And if you don't know the answer, just say, I don't know, and don't try to make up an answer. This is the default prompt right now defined by LangChain that you can play with as well. For example, here I wrote a new template. You can also do this. I, for example, said that I changed a bit and I said that if you return an answer, end with it's my pleasure. Just to test that if LLM is following my instructions, I wanted to see, right? You can just manipulate the prompt, or you can say that, okay, if you use any information from any split, properly cite it. But the capacity of LLM may not be enough to follow your instruction. That's why even if the role of LLM is not that important when it comes to digesting one single answer, for this kind of instructions, if you want to set the tone, change the output, put some guardrail, LLM capacity is very important, by the way, because of these instructions, if you want to customize further. Then I used it as a parameter in my retrieval Q&A chain, and then I asked the same question, and it returns another answer, like a simple one, and it ended with, it's my pleasure to help. I'm still using OpenAI, by the way, here as a LLM part. So it looks like it followed my instructions here, which means that my prompt is fine right now. Then you can just go from there and then do a bunch of other stuff. If you want to do custom context splits, right, because we said that you can increase the diversity by picking more splits, you can re-rank them to prevent lost in the middle issues. But how are you going to reorder and send back, right? In Haystack, it's already handled within the pipeline. In LangChain, you use another chain, they call it LLM chain, that you specify the ordered documents, which means that rather than abstracting away everything, you can still control each part of this chain, which means that if you reorder your context split, or maybe inject some other information by checking its metadata. We do this a lot, by the way, in production. Because we don't run the chain in the production, by the way. What we do is that in real world project, we hit the DB in a separate process. We gather the embeddings in another process. We do the LLM in another process. When we pick the splits, we do some processing according to the use case, which means that maybe I'm going to add some information from certain metadata. Maybe I'm going to use some third-party mappers. Maybe I'm going to use my own clinical NER model to augment the context a bit. And then I create a new context. Then I club them together and wrapped around the system prompt and send to LLM. So, but in LangChain, if you want to do this easily without more flexibility, of course, but you can still do easily, and then you can just send your reordered result as a context in another pipeline. So let's jump into the other topic and then filter by metadata, because I've been telling again and again that, right? So you can still utilize the metadata. You just don't need to stick to the embeddings of the split. That's why you can just use the information in the metadata as a search criteria. So you can say that because each split is returned by some similarity score, right? It might be cosine similarity, Euclidean, etc. But you can just filter the number of the similar splits based on a similarity threshold, similarity score. And this is how it is being defined in FICE. Okay, not all the vector DBs allow, by the way, that's why you need to pick the right vector DB. Not all of them allow filtering by metadata. Most of them do this, by the way, but not all of them. So I just filtered by some similarity score, and then it didn't return all of them, as you see, right? It just didn't return all of them. It only returned the one that is higher than, that are more similar than 0.8. So if you can keep doing this with the other metadata, because I already have the journal name. Maybe you want to exclude some of the journals, or you only want to get the answers from certain document types if you have a document type in the metadata. In the PubMed example, let's say that I only wanted to get my answers from BMC Public Health, right, journal, so that I don't want to get answers from the other. So the flow will be same, except the splits will be pulled from this specific journal. That's why, because this information is written in the metadata. Okay, so you can keep doing this, and then answers, like the final answer will change, of course, right? So I'm going to share the notebook with you as well, but I kept asking some different questions to see how it's going to work. So relationship between the diabetes and obesity. Now you can do your own literature search engine on your prem, right? You can just do this same with like 1 million PubMed articles and then build your own. But you probably may not want to do this on your own prem because of the complexity and computational cost and stuff. So at Johnson West, we have our own medical chatbot that you can ship into your own prem and then ask the same question and then get an answer by citation, actually. And then you can even ask follow-up questions. This is not using OpenAI, by the way. This is our own LLM and own architecture, which can be shipped on-prem. Okay, coming back to the original notebook, I can keep asking different questions. Let's say that I add some diversity and I changed my prompt a bit and then ask again. I end up with different. So I don't know if this answer is correct or not. The only way to do is that I will check the source documents returned by the RAG pipeline. And then while we are building this, we do this all the time with the in-house like physicians and annotators. We check if the accuracy or relatedness is there to make sure that LLM is not making stuff up or the answer is there. Maybe the answer is not there. LLM is still trying to answer, right? Or maybe his answer is there, but if you have 100 million splits, and even if the answer is there, since this is working with the similarity approach, it would be too naive to think that you will find the right answer right away, right? But in the production-ready RAG architectures that Amir also mentioned, and we also have at Johnson Labs, the chances are high that you will end up with whatever you need, rather than this toy project that I'm showing here. Now I'm going to use clinical guidelines as a document, which is also out there. You can just download. Those are some clinical guidelines, oncology documents, some like health forum information, some drug leaflets, etc., that you can still build a knowledge base using open source LLM. Now I'm going to use open source LLM for the next 5 minutes, right? So I just downloaded this guidelines from datasets library, and then I just like how does it look like? It looks like I have the source column, I have the title column for each guideline, I have the clean text and raw text. What I did is that I just use raw text column to index, to split and gather embeddings. And then I will have a new vector DB here that I can ask questions about oncology, about certain drugs, certain treatments. Imagine these are all patient records or some internal clinical trial reports that you need that you want to refer later on, right? So what I do is that I just load this again, same way. I just load the entire data frame into long chain document loader, and then this is how one document looks like. This is very long compared to PubMed article. Okay, this is very long documents. It's like a 3 to 5 pages. Each clinical guideline is 3 to 5 pages, which means that this is a perfect example to split. You can split section by section, as I mentioned before, right? Or you can say that do not split in the middle of a section. So how do you do this? Even with the simple char splitter, you can still do this by adding split pattern. Okay, split pattern is saying that, okay, anything that starts, because I saw the pattern here, it starts with, hashtags and then some uppercase. I just wrote a simple pattern. Anything beginning with hashtag, split over there. Like when you are going to split, pay attention to this split patterns. What I say, I'm not going to say that return each section in a different split, because for this you need to use custom splitters that I mentioned before, which I'm not going to use right now. Anyway, when I split, I ended up with, this is only for demo purposes. I only pick 10. Let me check how many I picked. I think I picked 20. Yes, I picked 20. I already have a 100 version of this, 100 document version of this, that I'm going to vget and then use over there, because I already populated the embeddings over there. Now I have this splits out of 20 documents. Now I have 266 splits, which means that every document has around like 10 different splits right now generated. Now each split looks like this. Now I have some metadata that I already attached, right? Because when you create a document from a data frame in LangChain, you can just define which column will be the page content, rest will be the metadata by itself. Okay, you don't need to specify this again and again, and then you can go back and attach new metadata, of course. So this is only one section, one split. It's probably a question section. As you see, question, there is no, it is like, if I just check till the end, it's end with contemplated. Let's check the original one, right? It's end with contemplate. So which means that this part is one section, right? One split right now, which the splitting worked fine, by the way, right? I didn't have to split into half right now. So let's scroll down and then embed all of this, like 266. I'm going to embed this in the same way that I explained above. Now I have the vector DB. It just took 9 seconds, okay, to gather the embeddings of 266 splits. Now I can find the most similar context given this query, which is going to return 3, right? I'm going to use small numbers here. Why? Because I'm going to use open source LLM, like Zephyr and Llama 2, right? And their context limit is limited. And I'm going to use 4-bit version of it, quantized version of it. And that's why I'm not going to send 10 different splits over there, because otherwise it will not just work. That's why I'm just trying to reduce the size of the split to send to LLM. So now let's load Llama 2. I'm going to use C++ version of it, because there's a, let me show that part here. There's a library called C transformers that you can use, of course, outside of LangChain. There's a specific dedicated library that's called C transformers that allows you to use any quantized version of it. If you are using, like, there are some local applications over there as well, which is called LLM Studio, that you can use this kind of C++ based, like converted by, like, this is the team that has just done this for Llama 2 and bunch of other. Even the Meditron has C++ version, which means that you can just load the 4-bit version, because each one of them has different loss and quality. I'm only going to use the 4-bit version. It's very easy to load by this. You can just load. Now I have this as an LLM engine in my RAG architecture. Now I'm going to replace OpenAI part with my local LLM. Okay, the same pipeline. Now I have the retrieval Q&A engine, pipeline RAG framework. Now in the LLM, I'm using Llama right now, rather than ChatGPT, right? And the same retriever that I just generated out of 20 documents, and I can customize my prompt again. Now I ask this question. When I ask this question, the result will be returned through local LLM right now. This result is returned from local LLM. Of course, it took almost 2 minutes, right? Because I'm using 4-bit version, and this is local LLM. It's not managed by giant cloud resources, because it's just one cluster right now, and it's loaded only on one worker right now. So it is not a GPU. So it is CPU, whatever, like, which means that in a CPU machine, you will be able to get these results, right? So it took 2 minutes, but it's still decent, right? So looking at the answer given my question, it does well, by the way, because I only gave three. I only got sent three splits, not 10. But given the answers and then the source documents, I can just go one by one and then make sure that the answers come from the source documents, right? So you can do this on your own time, by the way, but this is how we evaluate the LLMs. We run this kind of tests, check the consistency and relatedness to make sure that the LLM is not making stuff up, or the split has useless sentences. There are some techniques to reduce the useless sentences as well, by the way. Maybe you will find the splits and then return the entire section. You will find the split or return the entire paper, entire document maybe. There are different techniques to do this. If this is what while we are developing the products in production, we do this kind of error analysis and then make sure that we are on the right path, right? Now let's do the same for, because I'm running out of time, let's do the same for another LLM. By the way, with open source LLMs, you can also use the PubMed knowledge base we just created together, right? I just asked the same question over there, and I got, for example, the causes for diabetes. I have asked this question to the OpenAI as well, like ChatGPT as well, by using the same vector DB. Now I asked the same question. I just replaced the LLM part and got another answer, which means that LLMs tend to construct different answers given the context, of course. And then you just need to do the analysis and then make sure that the answers align well with the context. There are different methods, evaluation techniques in RAG, like RAGAX is one of them that we use in our evaluations, or Llama Index or Haystack also has this kind of modules that you can evaluate the performance of your RAG architecture. And the last part is Zephyr. Like this is again 4-bit version I'm using. As you may remember from the presentation that I showed, Zephyr is, when it comes to RAG, among all the open source versions, is even doing better than 70 billion Llama when it comes to context relevancy. So that's why that would be a perfect choice for me to use 7 billion version, which can fit into my memory, and then I just minimize the role of LLM over there. Now I just use the C transformers library again, load it, and then use in my chain as an LLM stage. Then I do everything that I have been doing so far. Then I ask the same question: relationship between diabetes and obesity, and it is again around 2 minutes. Okay, so around 2 minutes, it's to be able to write this. It's a CPU. It is almost same speed with Llama 2 7 billion, but the less hallucination according to the large scale benchmarks. Okay, so all these answers are generated from the context split returned by vector DB, answered by Zephyr over there. So, and you can you use the PubMed knowledge base with Zephyr as well, and then you can just load any vector DB from your disk and then reuse. So I suggest you collect the embeddings once and then play with different LLMs again and again. You can even serve your LLM in one place and then make a call. In Databricks, there is a many services for this embeddings collection or LLM serving. You can just register them within your LangChain pipeline here, and then rather than using LLM stage over there, you can use LLM from Databricks endpoint if you register it already. And there's a section in this notebook just to show this as well, by the way. So I know we went a little bit over time, and then but we will still be here to answer any question that you might have. We will stick around to answer the questions during the Q&A session.